6 parties put their case to the Truth Commission this past week. We will concentrate on 4 of them. Let's take a look at the different submissions. Did the politicians answer all the questions we as a nation have been asking for a long time? Did they accept full responsibility for their actions and that of their followers? What did they leave out? And were they truthful? First, the Pan-Africanist Congress.
The PAC is proud to have played its role in this historic task of overthrowing white domination in all its manifestations. We make no apologies. We have nothing to hide.
But there was a wide expectation that the PAC should explain the brutal attacks by UPLA on white civilians.
A new pattern arose in the 1990s, where civilians within the white community were attacked. In the nature of guerrilla warfare, which is unlike conventional warfare, detailed plans could not be made from Dar es Salaam. The actual targets were decided by local commanders. We also found that internally trained cadres could mount many operations without early detection and arrest. This advantage had a disadvantage. In the militarized environment in our country in the 1990s, in the face of third force violence against our people in vigils, in places of worship, and in trains and taxis, internally based operatives often made errors that APLA had earlier avoided. There was little political work done, unlike in the camps abroad. These are the causes of the departures in the 1990s, which we as political leaders who declared war mass and do take responsibility for, even if war itself was forced upon us by the aggressor, the upholders of white domination. On the Amy Bill issue, we wish to state that PASO was not a part of APLA. They are a component part of the PAC, not involved in armed struggle. This act occurred in the context of a strike for recognition by South African Democratic Teachers Union in the Western Cape. To support the strike, Operation Barcelona was launched to stop deliveries from townships, from towns into the township, not by PAC. Although PAC was not involved, PASO acted in solidarity with their teachers and with COSAS. They wrongly targeted and killed Amy Bill. We expressed our regret and condolences to Amy Bill's family in a letter to the United States Ambassador. We restate this position yet again through the TRC.
But Makwetu was not prepared to discuss the controversial UPLA attacks, such as those on the St. James Church, the King Williamston Golf Club, or the Queenstown Spur.
I'm not prepared to discuss St. James Church, as we made it clear that we can't, because some of our chaps right now are languishing behind bars and they are accused of that incident. It would not be fair on my part to say no or yes as far as St. James Church is concerned.
The National Party submission was the most eagerly awaited, as it formed the government during the entire period covered by the Truth Commission. Its leader, F.W. de Klerk, was also the last apartheid president. De Klerk started off well.
I stand before you today neither in shame nor in arrogance, but deeply conscious of my responsibility. My responsibility to be open, frank, and helpful. My responsibility to present you with an honest document aimed at achieving a real understanding of the conflicts of the past.
But in the end, de Klerk missed a wonderful opportunity to come clean in the eyes of the majority of South Africans.
The revolutionary strategies adopted by the government's opponents blurred traditional distinctions between combatants and non-combatants, between legitimate and illegitimate targets, and between acceptable and unacceptable methods. The normal processes of law and even the government's tough security measures seemed incapable of dealing with this situation. Members of the security forces watched with increasing frustration while revolutionary movements organized, mobilized, and intimidated or killed their opponents seemingly at will. The security forces were expected to play by the rules, while their opponents could and did use any methods that they liked. Consequently, the then government began to make use of unconventional strategies, which of necessity had to be planned and implemented on a need-to-know basis. In dealing with the unconventional strategies from the side of the government, I want to make it clear from the outset that within my knowledge and experience, they never included the authorization of assassination, murder, torture, rape, assault, or the like. I have never been part of any decision taken by Cabinet, the State Security Council, or any committee authorizing or instructing the commission of such gross violations of human rights. Nor did I individually, directly or indirectly ever suggest, order or authorize any such action. I feel in duty bound to also place on record that the above statement with regard to my position is also a reflection of the viewpoint of my colleagues who sat with me in Cabinet, the State Security Council, or Cabinet committees.
This was not entirely the truth. For example, de Klerk's Minister of Law and Order, Adrian Vlok, knew of the Vlakplaas assassination unit and was a regular visitor at Vlakplaas parties. His Minister of Defence, Magnus Malan, knew of the Civil Cooperation Bureau right from the start. Again, during the press conference after his submission, de Klerk was not entirely truthful when asked why his government did not close down the Vlakplaas death squad when its former commander, Dirk Coetzee, spilled the beans in November '89. Coetzee was backed up by two Vlakplaas colleagues, Almond Nofemela and David Chikalanga. But de Klerk's government allowed Vlakplaas to continue their dirty business for 3 years between its exposure and its closing down in 1983 after evidence to the Goldstone Commission. In this time, Vlakplaas supplied large quantities of arms to Inkatha warlords and assassinated several more anti-apartheid activists.
Vlakplaas was also at a certain stage then disbanded when allegations became substantially almost eerie. You couldn't prove. You could no longer say that it was just rumors. And we then took steps as information came to the fore. The people who were involved in the assassination are before the courts. I can only act, and a government can only act on the best information it gets. And it can only use its normal channels to gather information. It is a problem, it was a problem, we didn't do nothing about it, we went about it in a way to reach a solution, to find the true facts at all times. We never covered up.
De Klerk did add that information on specific operations by the former security forces will at a future date be put before the Truth Commission by a group of generals of the SANDF and the former police force. And he did say he was sorry.
I and many other leading figures in our party have already publicly apologized for the pain and suffering caused by former policies of the National Party. This was accepted and publicly acknowledged by the chairperson of the Commission, Archbishop Tutu. I reiterate these apologies today.
The ANC presented the Commission with the most detailed and honest report of all 6 parties. Central to its submission was the party's understanding of its armed struggle.
The majority of the people of our country, oppressed as a colonized people, had as equal a right to self-determination and the right to engage in struggle to gain this right as did other colonized people. We, like these other peoples, could and did engage in a just war. This is so, Chairperson, because the overwhelming majority of the actions carried out in the context of that just war of national liberation do not constitute gross violations of human rights. within the meaning of the Act establishing and mandating the Commission.
Attacking soft targets or civilians was never ANC policy. Mbeki said the death of civilians could not be seen as a gross human rights violation if they died in the crossfire of a just war.
This is a matter which preoccupied the leadership of the ANC for a very long time. From the beginning, as we tried to indicate when Mkondo Wesizwe was established, its instructions were that there should be no loss of life. That's why there was mention of strategic roads and communication system and so on. But of course, there is no war, Chairperson, that is conducted and there are no losses of life. The question that we had to consider was, what happens when there are civilians who might get caught in the crossfire? Was it possible to insulate, to carry out activities which would so insulate the rest of the population that you could, in all instances, ensure that no civilians were killed? And the decision was, in the conduct of war, it is not possible to avoid civilian losses. That in planning and carrying out operations, we should make sure that we don't target civilians, that we carry out operations such that there is as little loss of life of civilians as is possible. But that you could not insist on the conduct of a war where there were no such civilians.
But for those instances where civilians were hit, Mbeki expressed the ANC's deep regret. He named a list of operations that did not go strictly according to ANC rules. The first was an operation that was never intended to be.
There's another matter, Chairperson, which we might want to refer to, which was, I think, described at the time as the Silverton Bank siege. This is the only instance in which cadres of Mkondo Wesizwe took hostages. There were 3 cadres who were going on some operation. They realized that they had been spotted by the police and ran into a bank. They got into the bank and they tried to move all the civilians who were there to go and huddle in some corner while they talked to the police, making various demands. It was not planned. There was no plan to go into a bank and take people hostage. It was something that happened at the spur of the moment because they were confronted by the police. As they were negotiating with the police stormed the bank, killed all 3 cadres who were in the bank, and 2 civilian women, Valerie Anderson and Anna de Klerk.
Mbeki also spoke about the Amanzimtoti supermarket bomb in 1985, where 5 people were killed and more than 40 injured. MK cadre Andrew Zondo planted the bomb after hearing of a South African attack on Lesotho, in which more than 40 people died. Zondo was later hanged for this deed.
On being asked whether he had anything to say before sentence was passed, he said, "I wish to say this to the people who might have lost their friends and kids and families, that I'm sorry. Next thing, I wish that my country be friendly to its neighboring countries." Referring to what had moved him to act in this way. As the leadership of the ANC chairperson, would like to take this opportunity to say the sorrow that he expressed is a sorrow that the leadership of the movement would also express.
The Magoo's bar bomb in Durban in 1986 was also mentioned. Here, 3 civilians had lost their lives and 69 were injured.
Such intelligence information as we had indicated that these bars were frequented by members of the security forces. We regret and are sorry for the loss of life of those who might not have been part of those security forces.
But maybe the most useful to the Truth Commission's search for the truth was the ANC's list of more than 1,000 ANC members who died in exile. This included the names of 34 people executed by order of the ANC's military tribunal. But questions around the mysterious death of MK commander Tami Zulu in Lusaka in 1989 were not answered to full satisfaction. Zulu's parents told the Truth Commission last month their son was detained in Lusaka for a period in the so-called Green House. He died of poisoning a few days after the ANC released him.
We told them we had come to find out why our son was in detention. They told us that our son was not detained. Of course, this was proved afterwards to have been a lie. 6 months later, his wife phoned me to say TZ was now in an ANC cell and in solitary confinement, and that he was being tortured. Altogether, I remained in Lusaka for 18 days. And in the 18 days, I hadn't seen my son. Why was I not allowed by Mr. Zuma to see my son for 18 days? Even under the most cruel regime, apartheid regime, people were allowed visitors.
When he was in Lusaka, Tami Zulu was not confined to a detention center. He spent most of his time in residences, although separated from the rest of the ANC community. At no time was he tortured or subjected to any undue pressure. When he was released, he was ill. Independent pathologists found that he had contracted the HIV virus and was suffering from AIDS-related complex and possibly pulmonary TB. However, Tami Zulu died of poisoning after his release. And to this day, it is a matter of conjecture as to who administered this poison and why this was done.